if I'm a broker, of course, I want to make sure that I have the lenders that I'm working with are lenders who I can work with for a long time. Of course, that's important because you want to build deep relationships. This is a relationship industry, but also that my customers can work with for a long time, right? That's maybe even more important, that if I'm placing a 30-year mortgage, that some lender is going to be here in 30 years to make sure that that lender's there. So as you're thinking about, hey, which lender should I be working with? What are the things that a lender bring to the table? How they can be stronger in the marketplace? It's reach. So find lenders who have a great reach, and you're probably already doing that, and that's good. But if you're looking at maybe a smaller player that you might want to take a chance on, that's up and coming, clearly the thing you might want to look at is the technology. Hello. Welcome back to Mortgage Tech Talks. Of course, I'm your host, Tom Hall, coming to you today with an interesting trend that I'm seeing. So it all started at the Canadian Mortgage Conference. At that conference, Neighborhood and Fisgard announced their deal that they're now working together. It's great for them. And I got a chance to talk with both those parties when I was at the conference. And it was something that one of them said, which I thought was very interesting. And it was tech related. And it was so interesting. And I dug into it more. And it was one of these things where I think maybe at the time I didn't completely believe it. And so now that I'm back home and, in my day to day, I did more research, and what they said was actually 100% true. And it really kind of blew my mind. So I'm going to walk you through what they said, what else I found in my research, and then what this means for you as a broker or a lender out there. So I hope you find it interesting. Of course, it's all tech related, and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, so where did the inspiration for this episode come from? Well, it came from the Canada Mortgage Conference when I was there. It was the same time that Neighborhood and Fisgard, they announced their partnership, acquisition, merger. Those are all technical words, whatever. They came together, right? Let's just put it that way. And so obviously people are talking a little bit about it at the conference. I got a chance to speak with both people from both teams, basically, both the Fisgard team and the Neighborhood Holdings team. So, first and foremost, obviously from the deal, seems like a win-win. Kind of seems that, hey, Fisgard is able to provide a little bit more reach. But on the Neighborhood side, I said, okay, well, and this is me actually talking to the Neighborhood guys. So I was asking them a little bit about the deal, what they thought. Of course, they were very excited about it. And I kind of asked bluntly, like, okay, yeah, they bring on that side kind of the reach and stuff. For you guys, what's kind of the big piece that you're bringing to the deal? What kind of made this a good marriage? And, they kind of very quickly said, oh, it's the tech. We have a very modern technology stack. We can, with it, process deals very, very quickly. We're able to be efficient. We're able to scale. We're able to do all sorts of things. And, I kind of paused there for a sec. I was kind of, I wouldn't say surprised by it, but I was just more interested. I'm like, seriously, like the technology piece of it is a major component, a major thing that you bring to the deal. And they kind of looked at me like, oh yeah, like absolutely it is. And that's very interesting, obviously, right? Because why is it interesting? I think it's interesting because when you think about, at least for me, when I thought about a merger acquisition, it's like, okay, it's about, especially for lenders, it's really about, okay, what assets do they have on the ground? What market presence do they have? Like, that's what I think, really differentiates a lender in my mind, going into that, right? So what's your distribution like, right? So what relationships do you have with different brokers? If you go direct, what does that look like? I think both these lenders don't go direct. So what's your footprint in terms of brokers? What's the distribution? What's the concentration? All these different things. And then what kind of assets, do you have on your books, right? So how many outstanding loans and how are they performing? That's all important. And then on the other side, what are your investors and what are the terms that you're giving your investors? And then what's the, the spread across those different things? Like those in my mind are the fundamentals of a lending business. Not that I know a ton about a lending business, but that's what I would think about it. And I guess why I was a little bit surprised in all that is that the first thing you said is not any of those things. It was 100% to do with the technology. And they went on to say, it was like, hey, listen, if we can apply technology at scale and we can use that to be more efficient, which means we have less overhead in our business, that means that we can actually offer more competitive rates. And that helps all those other things that we just talked about, because I don't have to cover as much. I don't have as many costs that my credit spread or my rate spread needs to cover. And so they view this, the operational component, that technology component, that overhead component, as not just like a side thing that's just kind of interesting. It's a key differentiator in their whole business. So my mind was a little bit blown for that at that second, I should say. So I dug into it a little bit more and I found the press release, and sure enough, I guess my mind was going, maybe they're just saying that because they know I'm kind of the tech guy or whatever, and that's something I might be interested in. But I dug into more, and here's the press release. I'm just going to read it. I'm not going to share my screen. So sure enough, I'm just here. So we have a statement from the CEO of Fisgard. I don't know him personally, Raffer Strandlund. I don't know him personally, but this is what he said. He said, "We have a very strong ground game in terms of broker presence." So that was, I guess, for me, a little bit more what I thought more traditionally. Okay, what does a lender bring to a deal? Whereas Neighborhood is probably more tech savvy in terms of marketing, right? And then he goes on to say the combined entity will have more access to capital and it will have a larger company that can invest technology that will serve brokers better and ultimately helps our investors. So that's kind of the exact same point, right? Which is to say, if we have that right technology, if we can, scale up our business without having the proportional amount of overhead being added, we can maybe service brokers quicker, right? And that's just great. And people, service is a huge part of the game, especially in the broker space, I think, for these types of lenders. But also part of serving lenders is just giving them good rates, right? Making them competitive. And so technology is discussed twice, right? So I thought that was interesting, kind of confirms that technology was a huge, huge piece of this deal. But really kind of the point of this episode is I wanted to take it then a step back and say, well, is this kind of a one-off or is this something that actually we should be paying attention to? And so I kind of dug through, I asked ChatGPT a couple of things. The first one I thought of was the Nesto deal, right? So I think this was back in June of 2024, so just over a year ago. Nesto being a brokerage, kind of I guess more of a big brokerage, raised a lot of money, kind of competes on rate a little bit, acquired a lender, CMLS. And I'm looking at, again, the press release, at least on the Nesto website. And of course, it says Nesto CMLS, but then the third logo is Intellify, right? And we covered this in this podcast when it happened, but Intellify is a platform owned by CMLS, which helps. Honestly, I'm not intimately familiar with the platform, but of course, I think it's their internal tool they use to process their loans and manage their book of business. And very clearly, the fact that those three logos are part of the announcement, the technology piece was a huge piece for Nesto that was acquiring it. And of course, when you look here, it says, hey, the acquisition of CMLS by Nesto creates the largest technology-enabled lender in Canada. So this concept of a technology-enabled lender, which fast forward a year and a bit from now, that obviously Neighborhood and Fisgard are thinking about very much so, was something that was already on Nesto's radar a year ago, which is to say the lender that can properly leverage technology is going to have a competitive advantage in Canada. So again, there's a trend. There seems to be a little bit of trend. So I was like, okay, that's another checkbox, right? So yeah, what I heard at the conference, technology is important, very important for these lenders. Number two, seems that Nesto, that was the whole reason they bought CMLS, or one of the big reasons at the very least. And I don't know how much they paid for that, but obviously that was huge. And then, of course, as you do, you ask ChatGPT, hey, is there anything else like this? And boom, what pops up? I wasn't very aware of this deal. Other people might have been. But back in September of 2025, so 2 months ago, not too long ago, this is highlighting the Alta West Mortgage Capital Corporation announces acquisition of Premier Home Mortgage. And so big press release again, and I do what I do. I just kind of search the word tech, and here is another, it's not a statement, but just a paragraph that I'll read out. This acquisition presents a clear path forward for both organizations, a path where Alta West, so the acquirer, extends its reach. So again, this is what we were talking. It's kind of similar to the Fisgard Neighborhood deal where a Neighborhood acquired Fisgard to get a little bit extra reach. Now it seems that Alta West is acquiring Premier to get that same reach. Well, Premier Mortgage fortifies its capabilities through enhanced product suite and a modernized tech stack, right? And then, The transaction is a natural next step in a long-standing relationship between two companies built on a foundation of shared values of trust, stability, and security. And I won't read the rest. But again, right in the tech or the press release, it talks about, hey, if you're someone like Alta West who has that modern tech stack, you can actually go to a player like Premier and say, this can be a differentiator. This is how this can be, again, a happy marriage where we can both bring something to the table. You're bringing the reach, I'm bringing the technology, and together we can be stronger together. So I always say, one data point is a one-off. 2 data points, okay, maybe that's a line, I don't know, but 3, that's a trend, right? And very clear there's 3 here. So I think it's interesting. I mean, and now just to zoom out even further, let's talk about, okay, what does it mean for you as a broker? I mean, when you look at each of these wins, and I don't know the ins and outs of them, but presumably, at least the thesis is that it's going to be a win-win, right? So for both those lenders, involved. And I guess in the CMLS and Nesto case was a lender and a brokerage. But in each of these, so we have 6 parties, and they were all competing in primarily the lender space, a little bit the broker space. They all just got stronger, right? Because this is a win-win, because each of these different parties coming together, they can together be much stronger. They're making it themselves a much better competitor in the marketplace. And so what that means is that for everybody else in the market, and it's a big market, right? So there's a ton of other players, but it just got tougher, right? The competition just got tougher because the people who are doing these deals are now stronger. They're going to be more competitive. And so it got tougher for everybody else. And so I just think in any kind of market like this, where clearly there's a lot of acquisition, clearly there's a little bit of a shakeup going, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And it seems that right now, okay, of course, there's a thesis around the winners being these people in these acquisitions, and maybe the losers are the people who maybe can't find a deal, can't find that happy marriage where they can team up with somebody else and be stronger together. And so I guess first off, from a perspective of a broker, and if I'm a broker, of course, I want to make sure that I have the lenders that I'm working with are lenders who I can work with for a long time. Of course, that's important because you want to build deep relationships. This is a relationship industry. But also that my customers can work with for a long time, right? That's maybe even more important, that if I'm placing a 30-year mortgage, that some lender is going to be here in 30 years to make sure that that lender's there. Or so, yeah, that mortgage can be serviced. And so as you're thinking about, hey, which lender should I be working with? Really, we talked about it here. What are the things that a lender bring to the table, how they can be stronger in the marketplace? It's reach. So find lenders who have a great reach, and you're probably already doing that, and that's good. But if you're looking at maybe a smaller player that you might want to take a chance on, that's up and coming, clearly the thing you might want to look at is the technology. Because if a lender in the marketplace has great technology, what all 3 of these deals have shown us is that great technology is enough in itself to, again, have that second half of a strong marriage, a strong coming together of 2 different lenders. So, and then of course, for you as a broker, like it talked about in the neighborhood deal, not only is that going to, heighten your resolve that this is going to be a lender that's going to be around for a long time, but like we talked in the neighborhood deal, if they have better technology, then they're going to give you better rates, and they're probably going to be able to give you better service. So I think what these acquisitions showing, a long way of saying, is one of the more important things for you as a broker when you're looking at the lender partners you want to work with is what's their technology stack. That's crazy, right? That's such an interesting thing, and that we wouldn't think about right away. But both in terms of longevity, in terms of service, in terms of rate, the technology stack becomes super important. So I would challenge anyone, brokers out there listening, say, have that conversation. I mean, maybe people you're talking to might not know or might not care or might say that's irrelevant and Tom's crazy, but maybe not. Maybe they'll be happy to do that. Maybe you'll learn something, right? And say, holy, this is a tech forward lender and I love working with them, and I'm going to keep working with them because they're going places, right? And then, of course, the other thing here, I guess, is, because I do know that this is primarily a broker audience, but there are a couple lenders who listen to this, is to say, okay, well, maybe you're, the rest of the market right now. So there's these 6 people we just talked about, but there's obviously a whole long tail of different lenders and that all have different shapes and forms. And you're looking at a way to differentiate, and you're feeling and you're looking around and you're seeing all this M&A activity, and every single deal you're saying, oh crap, I just got a little bit less competitive in the marketplace, and that chips away, and you want to look for ways to be more competitive. Well, the historical playbook, I would assume, is the reach part, right? That first thing that comes in these happy marriages is the reach. But maybe you've kind of, I don't know, drained that well, so to speak, where you've kind of tried all the different tricks you have in your book to kind of get higher reach, and none of them is really working. You're not really moving the needle on that. Maybe it's time to take a look on the tech perspective, right? To say, hey, do you know what? I'm happy where I am. I want to be more competitive from just simply in the marketplace perspective. I can get more operationally efficient to serve my brokers better, give them better rates. That's a win in itself for sure. But I would say really the punchline, because that seems a little bit obvious, is that if you are looking around and saying, hey, I'd love to do a deal with someone and get stronger together, start with the technology, right? Be a force to be reckoned with from a technology perspective. So then someone who's maybe much bigger and has much better, I guess you could say, access to capital, different reach, and all the different things that go with being a lender, could take a look at you and say, hey, this could be a good marriage. Even though maybe they're not quite as big as me, we could partner up. I could use that tech stack implemented in my business, and now we're stronger together. That's the great thing about technology, is that it scales, right? That's the whole point, right? Is that it doesn't It's not going to be different technology for a small lender or a big lender. There's going to be some nuances, of course, but there's no reason why I can't scale up like that. So I'll leave it like that. I mean, it's an interesting time in the marketplace. There are a lot of deals going on. We talked about 3 in basically the past 12 months and probably more to come. And I think it's just, hey, I don't think the clock has struck 12. I don't know what the right analogy is as it relates to these acquisitions. There's probably a lot more. And if you're kind of looking at yourself and saying, hey, I want to be in these acquisitions, take a look at tech. And brokers, if you're saying, hey, I'm worried about the lenders that I'm currently working with, that they're getting left behind, they're not doing a deal with anyone, take a look at tech, because again, the technology-enabled lenders are going to be the ones that are doing these types of deals. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for listening this week. Hope it was a good one, and we'll see you next week.